does one get started with things? You know, you're staring at a blank page with a blinking cursor, or holding a pencil over a blank piece of paper. To me, the hardest part of any project is getting started with it. And I should know, this is my third time writing the opening to this video. The same can be true even for larger projects. The first 10 minutes of a film, first page of a book, first episode of television. Each of these is extremely important because they will determine if your audience stays for the rest of the show or decides to scroll on TikTok for several hours instead. Hey, if you're scrolling on TikTok while watching this video, I'm talking to you! But how does one even begin to begin? How does a pilot function, and when does it not? What rules are there for the start of the series, and what other things are important to television and... Okay, look. I'm sitting here talking and talking like this, speaking in the "What's up, guys?" YouTuber voice, because I'm stalling. I'm trying to avoid saying it. But you've read the title, you've seen the thumbnail, you know where this is going, so I may as well say the word and get it over with. So Helluvaboss in October of 2019, Vivzy Pop had just released her very first pilot, Hazbin Hotel. Despite taking several years to produce her first pilot, it was only a few months before she would follow it up with her second, a show that takes place in the same universe as Hazbin, a show that, at the time at least, did not have nearly the same public perception as Hazbin, that being Helluvaboss. The pilot was released to pretty positive perception, though not nearly on the same level as Hazbin. As such, Vivzy's company Spindlehorse decided to pick up the show, but post the smaller, more episodic episodes to YouTube rather than on a streaming service. And as time went on, more and more episodes of the series proper released, and the relevance of that original pilot faded away into non-canon-ness. Thus brings us to this year, when Helluvaboss was finally picked up by Amazon and placed alongside its sister show. To celebrate, the creators decided to do something special, to remake the original pilot into a new episode, Mission Zero, which has been received with mixed reception. There are those who defend the quality of the original pilot, and those who much prefer the updated version, for various reasons. Personally, I'm split, which is why I'm here. I wish to use my knowledge to, in the most analytical way possible, find out which pilot is superior, the original or Mission Zero. I promise that by the end of this video, after closely analyzing each episode, I will totally be able to crown a winner. And just to get this out of the way right here at the start, if you're wondering how I feel about the show as a whole, no, I'm not touching that. No, we're not talking about the show as a whole today, as my thoughts are too complicated and we'd be here for too long anyways. Nor will I be talking about the specific lives of any of the creators or people who worked on the show, including Vivian Medrano. That's not what I'm here for. That's not what I'm here to talk about. No, instead we are simply going to be focusing on comparing pilot episodes and which does a better job of introducing the show. First of all, I think there's something that we should clarify, and that's what a pilot is exactly. Because there are really two definitions of a pilot, and I think people really only know the first definition, that being the first episode of a series. It's very easy to find a pilot, you just scroll to the front and look, it's the first one. Hell, half the time it's the one that's titled pilot. But there's another less publicly common use of that word. It's a test episode. It's designed to sell a series to executives. Usually it has a pretty small budget and a packed script in order to introduce all of the information, just to see how it plays out. I believe the secondary definition is what the original Helluva pilot was meant to be. In this case, though, the executives was the general YouTube audience. This was an episode designed not as the first episode of a whole story, but to sell us on a concept. With that goal in mind, I do think the pilot does a very good job of that. It establishes the premise of the show quite well. Hell, even just the commercial segment does a very good job of explaining what's happening. If you want somebody gone and you don't want to wait too long, call the immediate murder professionals. It is very heavy on the exposition, but in a way that is clean and catchy and makes sense. It explains the idea perfectly. On top of that, we get introduced to all the important members of the office, who they are, their roles in the company, their dynamics with each other. This episode has a surprising amount of personality to it. The characters have this back and forth that is fascinating to watch. All of them are interesting. I like how Mox cares so much about professionalism when they're in hell, or how Millie actually has a personality outside of an obsession with Mox. And the specific style of humor really strings the episode together. It makes sense that this series was able to be picked up because this is a really well done pilot. However, it is not a very good first episode. Wait, but didn't you just say that a pilot was a first episode? Well, yes, but also no. Were you paying attention? Here's a pop quiz that's worth 50% of your grade. It just doesn't really fit as the first episode with the rest of the series. There are the obvious canon inconsistencies. The voice actors are different, their personalities are different, their dynamics are different. On top of that, the style of writing is a little different than the final product we ended up with. The humor and plots, and even the animation in the final show aren't at all like it is in the pilot. Everything is just a bit off from its final product. It's also just not a very good episode of television. The focus is a lot more on introducing the concept rather than having a plot, which again makes sense considering its goal. A lot of pilots are kind of similar in that regard. The only semblance of an overarching plot in this episode is them accidentally killing a kid. And that's more of a joke than a plot. The episode is more so designed around vignettes that are meant to introduce us to the characters, which it does a good job of doing that specifically, but it also means that there is really nothing else happening. The Luna cutaway is a good example. It takes up several minutes of the episode and doesn't really do anything other than introduce us to Luna, which isn't bad per se, but it's also not a very efficient use of time. I mean, it is if you're just trying to do an episodic comedy, which this is what it was, but this way of writing also absolutely destroys the structure and pacing. The episode is only 11 minutes long, which means we are running from one thing to the next without much actual flow. 1 second they're coming up with ideas on how to get more business, which I'm not really sure why they need. They already have the commercial, just pay to move it to a different time slot. The next, he's playing murder footage that he somehow got for some reason. And there isn't really a transition between these two things.
We can't afford a billboard, sir.
Helpful, Moxie. Really glad you're in the room right now. Have you guys forgotten what service we provide?
The whole episode is like that as well. When they transition to the commercial, they talk about it for like a full minute, then suddenly out of nowhere, they're cutting to it. And when they cut back, they are talking about something else completely unrelated to their previous conversation and the commercial. And very often the way they deal with the poor transitions is to supplement them with cutaway gags. Unfortunately though, this is a band-aid solution that they have placed everywhere. There's way too many cutaway gags, and the way they are placed is terrible and makes the episode so confusing. Like how there's a cutaway gag in the middle of the commercial that takes up several minutes, and then it suddenly cuts back to kids die for free. And it's like, is this part of the commercial? How did they get the camera in there? They're talking about this incident after the commercial ends, so maybe? And don't get me wrong, this whole bit is actually pretty funny. And it's important for the final gag, and the only way it's funny is because it suddenly happens cutting off the commercial, and the kids die for free bit is also pretty funny, so I kind of understand why they wrote it like this. But they really should have killed off one of these jokes for the sake of structure.
For the immediate murder profession. Kids die for free.
Because it takes so long, you completely forget about the commercial before kids die for free. It kind of weakens that punchline a little bit. Then they go ahead and make it even more confusing by putting cutaway gags inside of cutaway gags, like a little cutaway gag nesting doll. Like the one about Luna I was talking about. So this entire scene is about Luna, right? Then, in that scene, that is a cutaway gag. They then cut to a separate cutaway gag. And this one is actually important to know and has information that is relevant to the plot. But in order to get to that plot information, you have to dig through other cutaway gags to get to it. Oh, hey, Hey, by the way, did you know that you need to eat your veggies in order to be healthy? Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Do you have some? Sure, I have some right here. Well, do you want it? Yeah, I did, but you seem to have taken the piece of lettuce and covered it with chocolate, so not really anymore. Oh, no, you see, you peel that part off and eat that first, and then you get to eat the lettuce. But wait, that doesn't make any... Wait a second. Isn't this a cutaway gag? Oh yeah. Guess there's only one thing left to do. Ahem. And then when they cut back from the cutaway gags, they're talking about Luna again. All this rushing back and forth from one thing to the next makes it really hard to follow the string. You can't really tell which gag you're in, and it's not structured very well at all. And while it shows us the concept, it doesn't give us any idea of the plot moving forward. I mean, this is a problem with the show as a whole. It can't decide if it wants to be episodic, serialized, or semi-episodic. Ahem. But since the final product has an overarching plot, it would be nice to get some setup for all that in the first episode. You know, like a first episode should. I can see why they wanted to update this, because it hasn't really aged well with the rest of the show coming out. But like I said, it was never really meant to. It was an episode that was designed to sell a concept, not be the start of a series, and you can tell that. Well, surely, with all of that critiquing, that means that the remake of the pilot is so much better, since they now know what style of show they're writing, as well as the events that happen in the future of the series. Well... while it is true Mission Zero is more accurate to the characters and plot, it's still not a very good pilot or good first episode. Okay. I keep tossing around those words, but what exactly is important to a first episode? What should a pilot be doing to function? Well, there's many things. But they can really be categorized into 3 things. 1, establish. 2, the hook. And 3, the series engine. Are you still paying attention? Did you go back on TikTok? That's it! I'm taking your phone away till the end of class. You can go pick it up at the office afterwards. Establish. This is exactly what it sounds like. An introduction. Introduce exactly what the plot of the show is and how we got here. As a completely and totally random example, say an incredibly smart person with trained observational skills pretends to be a psychic for the police to help solve crimes. He does this because the police think he is in on the crimes he's been helping to solve, and he needs a fast excuse. And he's also kind of a bit of a pathological liar. This also includes introducing the main cast of characters. For this, it's best to focus on a main duo or even a main trio. We don't know anyone yet, and we're going to be spending a lot of time with these guys. They should be showing off some of their personality, like goofy, irresponsible, and childish, their motivations, and perhaps even a bit of their backstory, like raised by an obsessive cop who purposefully trained him to use his gift, but in doing so also made him hate any sort of structure. Their dynamics with other characters, like their best friend who's a little uptight and obsessed with doing their job as a pharmaceutical salesman well, but also has enough inner child to go along with the psychic's antics, although sometimes he must be dragged. And if there's enough time, you can introduce some smaller roles, such as the extremely serious cop who hates them and wants to keep them out of cases, or the pregnant chief willing to use any resource at her disposal. Really, you should just be establishing what the 4 pillars of story will be for this show: plot, character, theme, and setting, as well as the tone and style of writing for the series. This is the most obvious role of a pilot. We haven't seen the world or these people before, so we have no clue what exactly it is we're watching. It's like if someone was just isekai'd into another world. Being dropped in, they have no concept of what is going on. They also were likely just hit by a car and or transform into some sort of inanimate object, so be nice to them. The hook. If you've ever paid attention in 5th grade English, which everyone here has, right? You know how to write a paper, a good paper, and you should know your first sentence should hook your audience into reading the rest of your paper. The concept is the same here. It's the things that make you go, ooh, and stay for more. Traditionally, this is done through some sort of twist of expectations, a twist on characters, or a twist on plot, or a twist on genre. A great example is Gravity Falls, which actually has many subversions throughout the whole episode. The first few seconds establish this as a normal summer vacation about a normal family, only to immediately break that illusion. Right away, there's subversions, and there's more throughout with the style of humor, where they keep establishing things as scary, only to break away from that and kind of turn it into a joke. Then there's the big, obvious twist. Norman. The first few seconds set up a big, terrifying monster. Mabel believes he's a vampire, and Dipper believes he's a zombie. We've got all these different perceptions running through the audience's minds, pulling them in all different directions, and then, oh, he's actually none of those things. He's a gnome. Oh, and twist number 2, despite being a gnome, he's actually a threat. Then, of course, there's the twist at the end that Stan is somehow involved. All of these things are designed to hook you, keep you wanting more. They teach you what the show really is. This is not a normal summer. This is not a normal family. These are not normal monsters. This is an abnormal show about an abnormal town. The series engine. This is the one I think people know the least about, but it's just as important as the first two. It's really easy to understand. An engine is to a train as a series engine is to a series. STDs, anyone? Basically, if a hook is what makes you start watching a series engine is what makes you stay. It's the thing that's going to keep the rest of the series going. It's your psych detective agency. It's asking dad for help. It's the mystery surrounding journal number 3 or the mystery surrounding a certain grunkle. It's BoJack Horseman writing a book or working with his manager / ex-girlfriend. These are things that are being set up now so we can call back on them later for plot or drama or even humor. Things that create conflict or mystery or plot. You should never reveal your whole hand right away. It's important to hold back for later episode growth to keep the series going. So, how do all these things apply to Mission Zero? I expect a 5-page essay on my desk Monday morning. Establish. I think the biggest thing for Mission Zero for me is that it's a lot less clear what the premise of the show is. The original pilot is extremely clear. While there's not really a plot per se, they do go through explaining how Blitz started the company, how they have access to the living world, and how they kill humans for sinners in hell out of revenge. It's all either directly shown to us or explained to us, mostly via the commercial.
Well, luckily for you, thanks to our company's special access to the living world, we can help you take care of your unfinished business by taking out anyone who screwed you over when you were alive.
Mission Zero spends a lot less time covering the actual assassination plot. Really, all the explanation for what is going on gets dumped on us right at the front by this exposition monologue delivered by Blitz.
Some of us aim to be a little something more, a little something bigger, something cooler, cooler. So instead of selling them coffee, we're gonna sell them revenge!
And yes, the OG also has an exposition monologue, but it felt more natural and more clear because of the in-world commercial. It's not only trying to sell you a concept, but it's trying to sell the people in the series a concept. So it works both contextually and meta-contextually. And outside of that monologue, there's not much else going on in Mission Zero to show what's happening. They try to have this through line of them planning their first assassination, each presenting their own plan. We don't even see the final assassination plan. However, the way these scenes are directed is confusing. The people they kill talk about doing bad things.
We're up to no good. Yeah, this is what we do.
We are no good for society.
We're shady. People don't like us. For a reason, though.
I'm stealing candy from babies.
Yeah. You think I'm scared of you? I hate Christmas, okay? Tells you everything you need to know.
I'm stealing babies.
They also include all the lines about imps punishing sinners.
All right, so we all know how things go, right? Humans on Earth do some pretty fucked up shit, and then they die and they end up in hell. And sinners all have an idea of what imps are, right? We're little red guys with pitchforks torturing their souls for all eternity.
I think the point of all of this is that the members of IMP see all humans as kind of stereotypically scummy.
Humans are full of secret nasties. It's why so many of them end up here.
And seeing as his planning is all in their heads, it kind of makes sense. But it also, to the audience, kind of makes it seem like they're going up there to kill bad humans, rather than with the direct purpose of revenge. In the original, we have this guy who, as far as I'm aware, has no name, so I'm just gonna call him Ohio Murderer, and he wants to kill that yappy jogger. A jogger who has done nothing wrong but be an eyewitness to a murder. As far as we know, this jogger isn't evil, but Ohio Murderer definitely is. That's why he's in hell. But the point isn't that the jogger is evil and the Ohio Murderer is good, it's that the Ohio Murderer is hiring them to get revenge. By contrast, there is no client, nor is there really any target. Or at least no motivations for these targets. It's just 3 generic background guys whom we never technically see again, since, again, this is all in their heads. But because of their lines, they're presented as morally negative. Now again, we do have that exposition monologue where he says it's for revenge, but take that out and what do you get? We never see them go after actual revenge. With no client, we have no idea why someone wants to kill these guys. Because that's never explained. It just seems like they're killing them randomly. And because of that, our brains will fill in a reason that we can see. They must be killing them because they're evil. It's not impossible to tell what's going on, especially if you've already seen the series up until this point, but it is much more muddy and less clear. Everything else it tries to establish is done fine. We're introduced to all of the main characters, sort of, although the episode wastes a lot of time on other things. And when IMP is on screen, their character dynamics are just boring. There's none of the chaos or the conflict that there was in the original. They all get along a little too well. Even Blitz and Moxie, even when they're arguing about plans, they're communicating a lot better than they were in the original. Again, not perfect, just better. Hello, editing me here. I have since had to watch the episode several more times for a reason that you will soon see. And I have a couple revisions I feel I have to make. So I'm just going to pop in here every once in a while and add some points or change some points. And I don't have a script for this, so sorry. So I think the way that I described this relationship is, wrong. Saying that they get along implies that the relationship is less intense, which I don't think is necessarily the case.
It's professional, it's efficient, it's
Boring! Mox, if I had to pick between spending the rest of my career killing people like that or killing myself, I'd be sure to blame everything on you in my suicide note.
I think it's just different. I don't know how else to describe it other than being different. I think part of the problem is that the jokes are less funny. They don't land quite as well. Jokes and humor, they require a back and forthness to them, a setup, a punchline, a quip, a making fun of somebody, etc., etc. I have no script for this. Can you tell? But in this newer episode, there isn't really as many jokes, and the ones that are there don't really land. They're not really jokes in the dialogue. They don't really bounce back and forth between them. I think that this is what is causing their relationship to feel so different. And I mean different both from the original pilot and the series proper as well. If it was just different from the original pilot, I wouldn't care nearly as much. But it's just like they don't really talk to each other. It's more like their relationship is balanced rather than this is a new company that has just formed and they need to learn how to talk to each other, if that makes sense. It just feels different. I will say, though, I think Blitz is actually done fairly well. There's some subtle moments of camera work and character action that really say a lot with everything there is to come. But like I said, those moments are just subtle, and they only really add to his character upon rewatch. It does everything technically right with its characters, but it's just something about them feels off. Even Blitz, who I just said was kind of done well, is still missing some of his edge. He's not nearly as much of an asshole as he was. Hi, me again. Once again, very similar problem to the previous thing. Saying that Blitz is less of an asshole implies that he is less intense, which is not necessarily the case. I think saying that he's less of an asshole is wrong, and more so that the episode tries to paint him in a more sympathetic light, which I don't think is necessarily a problem for like a later episode, but for the pilot where we are about to watch this guy be an asshole to everyone around him for several episodes, it feels weird. We shouldn't feel sympathetic towards this character yet until we get a little later on in the series and learn more things about him. You know, if Blitz's arc throughout the whole series is him screwing up and then getting better and then screwing up and then getting better until he finally starts to improve himself genuinely, then he should start the series at a point where he is already pretty bad. Doesn't necessarily have to be his lowest, right? He can get worse, but, you know, we shouldn't start the show already feeling sympathetic for him. That should come naturally over time. He is especially painted to be sympathetic with the way he acts with Stolas. I feel like this dynamic is a good example of what I mean of, like, it feels different than it does in the series proper. It doesn't feel like actually legitimately how their relationship started. Right, because, like, Blitz and Stolas' relationship is that of two people who are using each other, right? Blitz starts the whole thing in order to get access to the book, and Stolas keeps it going in order to get access to Blitz. They are using each other. Now, there is an obvious power dynamic with the fact that Blitz is an imp, and the only way he can start his business and get any amount of respect whatsoever is via the book. So he is, you know, extremely desperate to get access to that book. And Stolas, meanwhile, is a prince. So, you know, there is power dynamics here. They are not standing on equal footing. But we can't act like Blitz was entirely innocent in their relationship. They both do a bad thing. That's what makes their dynamic interesting. But here, it feels like they're pushing that relationship just a little too hard right at the start. Right? Stolas has lost some of his manipulative tendencies. I talk more about him later, so put a pin in that. And Blitz, meanwhile, is like weirdly seems to have a crush on Stolas already. Right? He's nervous, he's laughing a lot. He acts with professionalism, which is not how Blitz normally acts, implying that this relationship is different. He just seems like somebody who already has a crush on him, which should not be the case at this point in their relationship. Their relationship should have a lot more tension and a lot less romance. And again, all of this and all these scenes just paint Blitz in a weirdly sympathetic light when he's supposed to kind of be an asshole still at this point. I'm not saying you can't have more subtle moments of him having more that's deeper, right? But this just feels wrong. This doesn't feel like Blitz. This doesn't feel like Blitz's relationship with Stolas, and that sort of bleeds into all of his other relationships as well. This doesn't feel like the dynamic between IMP. None of the characters seem right. What I think is the problem here is that the writers of the show just got far too used to how the characters are now, in modern day, after all these episodes and all of this character growth. And now, just resetting them back to day one is a very difficult task. They're not exactly how they are now, but they're not exactly how they were then either. There's some horrifying mishmash in-between version, which is where I think this off feeling is coming from. And on top of that, they're just much less interesting, which I suppose leads me to the hook. This episode doesn't really hook me at all, and I think that's because nothing happens in it. I think this was meant to be a direct adaptation of the pilot rather than a completely new first episode with a new plot. There are several moments that are either similar or exactly the same from the original, and like I said, when discussing the original pilot, it doesn't really have much actual plot going on, more so vignettes to introduce the main characters. When adapting and changing this to fit their modern day style, one of the things they did was fix the confusing structure. Wait, isn't that a good thing? And to that I say, who are you and how did you get in my house? But also yes, and also no. I did say that was a problem, and it is a good thing that they fixed it, but in taking that out, they also removed all of the vignettes with the characters, and then didn't really replace them with new ones, or a new plot. It's honestly hard to say what the plot of this episode is supposed to be, and there's definitely not any twists or subversions that tell you what the style of show is going to be. Hi, me again. Having seen the episode again, I think actually this moment here, right at the start, is meant to be our subversion of expectations.
And sinners all have an idea of what imps are, right? We're little red guys with pitchforks torturing their souls for all eternity. Well, that's f***ing outdated.
But this still doesn't work for me. I think there's a reason that I didn't catch it as the subversion of expectations the first several times watching it, and that's because it's not a very good subversion for a couple different reasons, actually. First of all, it doesn't really make much sense as a subversion. The expectation that we are setting here is that imps are evil little demons whose job is to punish sinners, that hell is seen as this dark and evil place, right? And we are immediately breaking that subversion by saying, actually, this is a comedy, hell's gonna be a little silly in this show, and imps are just normal, average people who do normal, average jobs. Except, however, that subversion is then immediately followed up by our main group of imps doing a job that is not a very normal job, right? Blitz says that the imps of hell do normal things like being baristas. Being barista is a normal job. Being an assassin is not really an everyday normal job. And also, it doesn't help that the people they are assassinating seem like sinners. It just goes back to the point that I made in the first section, talking about establishing and how the plot isn't necessarily clear. Because if the plot's not clear, the subversion isn't going to hit as strong as it should. Instead, it just feels like it's pulling back its own point that it just made. Also, why is he explaining this to them? In the original, he is explaining all this exposition via a commercial, which makes sense why he needs to describe the business in order for people to understand what it is they're buying. But here, based on the fact that we cut out from this plan and he's talking to Moxie and Millie about a plan in order to kill these guys, it kind of makes it seem like he's explaining this to Moxie and Millie, but why would he be explaining this to Moxie and Millie? They already know all this information. Who is he talking to right now? So yeah, I think that was it for this one. In the original, every single twist has to do with this child. Firstly, that they killed the wrong target, then that the kid is still in hell with them, then that the kid was actually the right target, and then the fact that they actually kill a child. But I guess they didn't want to make any of their main characters cruel, so goodbye child plotline.
Oh, they're the easiest ones. You barely need any pressure for their next Millie, we aren't killing kids. Right?
I do, again, kind of understand this, because keeping this twist makes Moxie's arc and murder family make way less sense. Hey Mox, why are you afraid of killing a family? Y'all just killed a child and then cut up their body parts and gave him back to his mother. But this was also what made the characters interesting. They're demons. Of course they're terrible. And that's fun, in that Always Sunny kind of way.
I don't want to be his friend, I want to shoot him in the face.
But now we've taken it out, and we have nothing. Well, that's not exactly true. We've replaced it with running over the show's creator, which is a good twist for a punchline, but it doesn't really tell us that much about the characters other than they're dumb. They don't make any drastic decisions here like they did with the kid. This entire crash is just an accident, nothing more. And also, if this is your first introduction to the show, there's a good chance you don't know this is the show's creator. It's still funny, but way less so. This twist doesn't really tell us much about the show, or the characters, or the plot, or the style, so now there's nothing interesting to hook onto. And then you also have the less interesting character dynamics. Like I said in the last section, the characters feel off, like there's less of them, and that translates into the dynamics between them. It's all still there, it just feels like it's been punched down rather than punched up. And don't get me wrong, some of those things from the original pilot kind of needed to be punched down, but not all of it. There's less IMP in the episode overall, but there's also less jokes overall. I mean, that's not to say every joke in the original landed, quite a few did not, but the style of humor really helped to carry the dialogue, and without that, it just feels so much duller to watch. In general, it feels like a lot of the personality is gone. So, where does that leave us? You're adapting this episode that has very little plot and is just meant to show character dynamics, except there's less of the characters, less interesting dynamics, less humor to carry the episode, and you haven't replaced the paper-thin plot with anything, so why are we here? What exactly is supposed to happen here? What is this episode supposed to be about? What is the purpose of this episode? Oh. Right. The series engines for both episodes remain the same. There are two of them. The assassination plot. Sinners can call on IMP to go up to the mortal realm and kill humans. And the other plot. There's, probably something you've noticed I've left out. Except not really, because I had to talk about them earlier, but just pretend for the sake of past me. A character that takes up most of the new episode's actual plot, and is also the most controversial character in the entire series. Stolas. For both episodes, this pilot is setting up the beginning of what will become Stolas and Blitz's relationship. But my issue with this part isn't necessarily the engines themselves, but the balance of them. Way too much of the new episode's runtime is dedicated to Stolas and Blitz. An episode that was originally mostly about explaining what these demons do and how they are assassins, gets adapted to an episode where instead, the runtime is focused on Stolas and Blitz, with the assassin stuff taking an unfortunate backseat and getting screwed up as a result. Which is a sentiment that may sound familiar. This is ironically a microcosm for one of the biggest complaints people have about the show as a whole, that being the fact that the show started as an episodic plot about assassins and turned into a soap opera romance. Its premise didn't really deliver on the promise, so what they've done instead is change the promise. But I'm here to watch people get murdered by imps, not to watch an owl get dicked down in the world's most awkward will they won't they. Now hear me out on this one, because I, myself, am kind of a Stolas shipper. On top of that, not only do I like Stolas, he's actually my favorite character. Believe it or not, based on everything I have said and am about to say. Listen, just because I am a fan of something does not mean that I am blind to criticism of it. I'm not delusional. I notice the problems all the time. In fact, maybe even more so than the people who hate it, because this is not the Stolas I asked for. Neither is this, definitely, but they really both aren't. Stolas in this pilot is very strange. The original is very obvious how he ended up being different. He's a villain who is cold and calculating, which is obviously very different from how he ended up in the series. So, yes, he needed to be changed in this episode, but I feel like at this point he's almost out of character in the other direction. Rather than being cold, smart, and uncaring, he cares about Blitz so much it makes him, well, not dumb per se, but so horny that he's kind of naive. And that's not to say he isn't horny in the actual series. I mean, look at him. And he does care about Blitz in his own fucked up way, But he was also cocky and kind of a schemer as well. After all, he is the one who set up the whole deal thing in the first place. He's a deal maker, and he shouldn't be so fooled by Blitz, even despite his crush. There's just a lot of strangeness written with his scenes. They are also kind of, extremely uncomfortable, like way more so than usual. Aside from that, a lot of scenes with Blitz and Stolas are repeated beats as well. You, of course, have the classic, sorry I fucked your husband, but I don't count that one. Because even though we've seen it twice before, you kind of did need to redo it because it comes back later in the series, but you also kept the same joke about the creepy phone call from the original pilot, even though that also appears in Murder Family, an episode that is still part of the canon.
When I'm lonely, I become hungry. And when I become hungry, I want to choke on that red of yours, your and lick all of your before taking out your and with more teeth until you're screaming like a fucking baby.
Eat this. And then you know that bridge over the freeway?
Yeah?
Shit off it.
Oh, Blitz, I'm so excited. I cannot wait to feel your slimy inside of my
Gotcha! So you're a little devil, huh? Come to drag me and my kin to hell? Well, not today, Satan! Gonna send y'all back where you came from!
While you and I are jelly sandwiches.
Come to my palace right now and claim me. Make my body yours. My bird. Get inside me. Go down. Find my... Then I want you to gnaw on me. Tie me up. Spin me round like a little... Spin me like Daddy's little... Then I want you to... My fountain of... Then drink it like a thirsty dog. Oh, okay, yeah, there's that. I'm at work right now, so how about next time, okay? Bye!
Oh, shit. And by doing this phone call again, you are having Stolas get an introduction scene for a third time, and a second time within canon material. Watching these episodes back to back, the way the canon intended, why on earth would I want to watch the same character get introduced in almost the exact same way twice? It just feels a little weird to have this scene that is clearly directed as a character introduction in the first episode, then do a scene that is clearly meant to be a character introduction that is also under the exact same circumstances in the second episode.
He said his name was Stolas.
Stolas? I never heard of that. I don't know that name.
Yeah, well, he knows you, and he sounds pissed.
Hey, Stolas! How are things?
You took something from me, Blitzy. Something very important and very powerful. Something I would stop at nothing to get back.
Isn't your place, massive? I mean, couldn't it be in your 10th or 11th library?
You don't think I know what you're doing? I see right through you, Blitzy. You took my grimoire so you'd have an excuse to come see me again and ravish me like you did the other night.
Damn it. Stolas, this is a really bad time.
When isn't it a bad time, Blitzy?
What is it?
I've been meaning to follow up on our last little conversation regarding my grimoire.
Okay. And then there's the series engine, part of Stolas' scenes, the deal. This is the thing that begins Blitz and Stolas' relationship and keeps them connected for the first part of the series. It's the thing that's going to keep Helluvaboss running, so it's very important that they make this deal now in episode 1. And they make the deal in Murder Family, which is now the second episode. Oh. To be absolutely fair, in that conversation, he does say, I'm following up on our previous conversation. So clearly they have talked before this, but did we really need a whole episode just to fulfill the previous conversation box? A conversation that it could have easily been had off screen because it is basically the exact same as the phone call in Murder Family. The only way it is different is that it is more vague. In Murder Family, the conclusion is Blitz and Stolas will meet every month on the full moon to... And then Blitz can keep the book. The conclusion in Mission Zero is that the book will mean Stolas will have to come around more and he will be back. They're basically the same thing, but Mission Zero is missing all of the specific terms of their deal. I will say the other series engine in this episode, the assassination business, is done okay. I've already talked about the confusing establishing of the business, but it is still clear that they have a business, one that takes them to the human realm and will presumably be a big chunk of their problems and plots going forward. The only issue is there's not enough of it in this episode. Mission Zero, in my opinion, is not a new pilot. Not really. It's not an episode meant for new viewers to get an idea of where the rest of the show is going. Mission Zero is a new pilot for old viewers. I mean, you have the rock cover of their commercial jingle that if you're now watching in proper canon order, you haven't seen the original of and therefore have nothing to connect the cover back to. You have them running over the show's creator that you might not know if you were starting this show for the first time. And it's not just the end of the episode that feels this way. It's the whole episode. There are a bunch of subtle character interactions that you would only know what they mean on rewatch, which is not necessarily bad, but everyone also talks in this weird, vague language that kind of seems to think you should know what's already going on.
All right, everyone, new rule, guys. We only use appropriate language in this office from now on, all right? I don't want to hear no swears, no filth, no fucking potty mouth of any kind. Do you understand?
The way it's designed is kind of a wink and a nod to people who've already seen the series, which is not what a pilot is meant to do. In this way, Mission Zero also fails as a first episode. So there's no twist in this episode. There's barely even a hook. It technically establishes, but not very well, or in a way that's clear, and any series engine work is either beats that are repeated, not done well, or both. It's mostly both. And on top of that, the plot here is paper thin with little going on, so what are we wasting our time on? A remake is supposed to take all the best parts of the original and change or fix the worst parts. Obviously, that's a loose definition. Remakes can have different goals, but still, this episode does the opposite. Aside from fixing the structure, it still has a lot of the same issues as the original pilot. A loose plot, not setting up future plot points well, and it loses the best parts of the original. The clarity in the concept, the character dynamics, and the style of humor that, for better or worse, made the original pilot stand out. So you have one pilot that's a good episode to establish things but does not accurately affect the final result of the show, and another that's written in the style of the show and continuity of the final product but fails to really function as a proper first episode. So which is the better pilot? Well, obviously the answer is that they both suck! And Helluvaboss is bad. We should delete this show from the face of the earth because it's bad. Nah, I'm kidding. It would be kind of ridiculous to think like that. Well, the truth is, there's really no way for me to know for certain. At least not by myself. I am already tainted. I have already seen all of Helluvaboss, and therefore I know the plots it's setting up. I can theorize and hypothesize, but I can't really know which one works better for certain because I'm already aware of what's going on and what it's trying to set up. Really, the only way to possibly be able to tell which is better is if you happen to know some people who have never seen Helluvaboss before and have them blindly test the 2 episodes to see if they can figure out what the rest of the show is going to be and which is the best introduction to the plot.
If you want to just introduce yourself, you don't have to say your name if you don't want to. If you have any social media you want to shout out, that's fine too. I'll link whatever you say, but yeah, well, however you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Ellery Beck. I am a writer and a lover of film and television. You can find my work, primarily creative and analytical, on my website, ellerybeckwrites.weebly.com. And I'm here because Idiot Box asked me to be here.
I'm Renee.
Perfect. And wonderful. I love that.
These 2 lovely, wonderful people that you are now seeing on your screens are my friends. They're my friends, so I get to use ugly pictures of them. And believe it or not, neither of these people have ever seen Helluvaboss.
And just to start off, before we start watching anything, can you just tell us like what your baseline knowledge about Helluvaboss is?
Yes, I know Helluvaboss is related in some way, either just the production company or in world, to Has Been Hotel. And I've listened to some music from Has Been Hotel. I have not watched the show. And I know Helluvaboss started as like an independent thing and then got picked up and things changed since they were independently produced.
But you don't know anything about like the plot.
No. I know it. I think it's something about hell, but I don't know if that has like me inflating Has Been or like what.
They
Yeah,
do
I
take
don't know
place
how.
in the same world. I'll give you that much. This one
Okay,
is not hell.
okay.
You are correct. I just wanted to ask, like, ignoring that, we just watched that. What do you know about Helluvaboss, just like as a baseline?
Almost nothing. I know that it's a Vivzy Pop show, so that it takes place in the same universe as Has Been Hotel. But I don't have any first-hand experience with watching Has Been Hotel or with Vivzy Pop as a creator, so I don't even know in what order those two shows were originally produced. I think one of them is a spin-off of the other. That's all.
Okay, so
I mean, I know that it takes place in hell,
Yeah.
and that's all.
That's right. These two are idiot dum-dums who know nothing about the world of Has Been Hotel. These are fresh faces that are going into this almost entirely blind. And my plan is to give each of these people a different first episode. Ellery will be given the original pilot, and Renee will be given Mission Zero. Then, after watching each respective episode, I hope to see whether or not these, again, idiot dum-dums, are able to tell what exactly the series is, who the characters are, and what the plot of the show is. You know, all of the things that a good pilot should. And also, just for the record, both of these people are also writers in the same way that I am. I've seen their writing, I've seen their analysis. I trust their skills. So, first of all, and I suppose what is probably most important to everything I have said in this video, were Ellery and Renee able to tell what was going on in each pilot?
I think the concept, based on the pilot we just watched, is that this company is struggling and will need to find a way to retain clients or gain new clients, but the actual drama will not necessarily come from having to bring in new clients. It will come from the workplace drama, like the style of The Office, like Parks and Rec, like Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's going to be a lot more about the characters and their relationships with one another, with the business as like background setting.
I think the concept is these imps going back and forth between hell and earth and sort of finagling the system of punishment. Because when you think about like how hell works, like at least like in the Bible, and not knowing how hell works in this universe, like, you know, like you're supposed to like be punished in hell, but they're being punished on earth by their time being shorter, or like getting, you know, or like through violence, whatever. So I think in the concept is that they're finagling the system and they're gonna get in some sort of like bureaucracy trouble in hell, and sort of balancing those two things in order to make money.
Could you tell what the purpose of the business like was?
Yeah, they're like mercenaries or people who have already died.
So like it clearly is like a workplace, like that's very obvious. Could you tell what the workplace, like what their job was exactly?
No, I guess revenge on humans, but unclear how the revenge operates. So no, not really, like, no, not clearly what the business is. It just kind of looked like, because I was like, are people, like, are they being hired, like, by humans or, like, demons? Like, are they sent on hits? Like, how does that...
You were just confused by like how they make money from this, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, maybe it's like or maybe like even if like they're in hell, like maybe like they don't need money, whatever. But like sort of what do they get out of this? And maybe it's just the like nature of imps to want to cause harm and mischief, and through that they get some sort of gratification, or like or maybe they're like finagling the numbers of hell and like increasing the number of like sinners in hell, and through that they're reaching some sort of quota. Like,
what's clear to me based on this conversation is that Renee is so close to figuring it out. It's like I was saying earlier, it's not impossible to come to the conclusion that this is what is happening here, but it is a lot more difficult than in the original pilot. And you can see that based on the differences in the way that they answer. Ellery's answer is short, quick, to the point. It's a couple sentences long. But Renee spends a long time questioning herself and questioning if she's right about the pilot. And you're thinking, well, maybe Renee is just especially stupid. Only I get to call my friends stupid. We're all idiots here. It's in the name. But in fact, no. For you see, after I showed each of these people their episodes, I proceeded to switch them, meaning that I also showed Renee the original pilot. And here was her response to that.
And of course, more clarity, explaining what they actually do and how they actually operate.
Do you know what they actually do now?
Yes, they are like hitmen, so... but for like demons, like for unfinished business. And I like that they included the guy talking about them being like, yeah, like I hired them to kill my wife, and then I like, you know, I got the death penalty.
Yappy jogger.
So clearly the issue here is not Renee, but is in fact the episode itself. Even Ellery, after having watched Mission Zero, because again, remember, I switched them, agreed with me, and I thought her points were particularly interesting.
It's a lot clearer what the conceit of the show is this time. The company's brand new, this is their first hit, they're still kind of gaining their foothold in terms of what they want the company to be for, and they have no clientele yet. The grimoire is front and center. We know what it does. We know why it was important that he got it. We know that there's a timeline for it, that at some point Stolas is going to want it back. And so the engine of the series is much clearer. The engine of Blitz and Stolas' relationship is much clearer, although I wouldn't say it's particularly more nuanced. I understand why the show takes place during this time now, because we're starting with the company's beginning. But it becomes a lot less clear who they are doing it for and why. It seems much more like they just enjoy killing people, which is fine. It's possible that that's something that changed after the show was picked up, that they are no longer doing it for the benefit of humans. But that's something that definitely now goes undiscussed, undisclosed, and potentially overwritten. I don't think they talked about being hired by humans. I don't think they talk to anybody about wanting to have someone else murdered.
It seems that by fixing the structure and establishing some of the timeline and lore and such, those things were able to come across clearer. But the actual purpose of the company is a struggle for new fans to figure out. I tried to ask both of my participants to see if they thought they were able to tell where the rest of the series was going.
I think what happens next is, of course, like in my brain I'm seeing like every episode end with some like police captain of hell being like and there's some rift happening between the realms and I need to catch whatever's going on, which like builds into like the season finale where like they are getting caught for these like little crimes that they're doing. But in terms of like what's actually happening in each episode is probably like in my brain, them figuring out how the business is actually working, and Blitz's friends realizing, like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, and sort of him using his friends to get his own aims, and sort of trumping all of their thoughts, feelings, opinions on how it should be run, so that they end up losing faith and trust in him, inevitably. But that's like the overarching arc. So each episode, answering the question, each episode of the series, I think they're just doing different jobs of going onto Earth and seeing what Earth is like and interacting with some humans, but not really. I don't see the humans as like characters in the show, but it's the people part of the business learning how to operate with each other, while also trying to figure out what Blitz's end goal is with his business. Mm-hmm. Even as they're fighting each other about how to operate as a business, I'm like, this is a really good episode of scene of an episode. This is a really good scene of an episode, but in the end, we don't know what any of the characters really want at the end of the day, or we don't even see, like, we just don't see an end goal, basically, for what Blitz wants or what any of the other characters really want. So I don't think it operates well as a pilot.
It like, what you're saying is, like, it doesn't telegraph to you, like, where the show is going well enough, basically.
No, yeah, it doesn't, it doesn't allude to arcs, like specific arcs. Like, we see the business and we see the relationships between the characters, but we don't see specific enough conflicts, I think, to be able to see where the rest of the season's going.
I think it will probably be a Monster of the Week style format, where every week or every episode they have a new case where they gotta kill a person, and various shenanigans will occur. I think probably we'll see some growth between Blitz and Moxie, but I don't think we'll see any growth in any other direction. I think probably Luna will remain very stoic and unapproachable, at least through the first season. I think that's maybe a longer shot. I think Owl Guy, the boss's boss, the owl, I think the Owl Guy will start as kind of a distant figure and become more relevant and have more appearances as the show goes on, potentially even becoming a main character.
Mm-hmm. So both of them kind of have the basic idea, but once again, we're seeing here how Renee is just a little bit lost. So both of them have the basic idea. You know, this is a business. Every episode is going to be about running jobs. There's going to be an overarching plot involving problems with the business, etc., etc. But Renee just seems a little bit more lost. Even at this point, she still doesn't understand what the jobs are for, other than just going to Earth. But plot is not the only thing that needs to be established. I also asked both of my interviewees what they thought of the individual characters.
I did like the characters. The main guy seems to be kind of a... this is gonna be a really, like, awful comparison, but a kind of like Michael Scott.
Like, he is kind of like a Michael Scott, yeah.
Like just kind of like ruining like the function of the workplace and getting himself like deeper and deeper into trouble. Is just kind of like a bad boss, in a, like, you know, like the bad boss trope where he wants to be productive in bad ways that ultimately backfire. And then
differently, would you say that he is Helluvaboss?
And then of course there are the two henchmen who are in love and seem to just be kind of like there's like the loser and then the like cool girl, which is an interesting dynamic, I think, in terms of henchmen. The main confusion was why the girl was a wolf. And she was kind of like the like.
She's a hellhound, is what she is.
Oh.
This is going to be a lot harder because I didn't catch most of their names. I know
That's okay.
that
You can just
Moxie,
label them with like, yes, Moxie is one of them.
Moxie is the only one whose name I'm confident in. Moxie seems to be like the second in command and is the most combative. His personality, I assume he, him pronouns, seems to be like angry, irritable, short fuse, and like to a degree the straight man of the group. I think he is kind of an interesting foil to who I would say the main character is, the titular boss, whose name I don't know.
Yes. His name is Blitz.
Blitz. Oh yes, because there was something about the O being silent, and I remember being so confused by that, but we just had to move on. Okay, Blitz? So I was thinking like it was like Polish, and it was like Bliotz, and the O was in the middle. Anyway, okay, Blitz. He seems to be kind of the Jake Peralta of it all. Kind of loosey-goosey, class clown type, more interested in how people think of him than the running of the business. And him and Moxie are kind of the most antagonistic toward each other. Even though Blitz isn't antagonistic about it, they are opposing forces. I think Blitz is a little bit more interesting than Moxie just because Moxie seems to have one mode that's very extreme. And even though it is extreme, if he's being extreme all the time, then there's no contrast. And so it feels more one note. It feels more shallow than a character who is similarly one note, but who like can scale up to an extreme. I have no feelings about Moxie's wife. I don't know her name. I don't know anything about her. She has a Southern accent, and that should endear her to me because I'm Southern. But mostly I think she exists as an extension and a defense of Moxie, which I take umbrage with because surely there's more. Surely a woman can have more traits than being an extension of her husband, right?
Believe it or not, it is so much worse than the show proper.
Worse in the show proper? And I do think there's less character work in this episode. I think they kind of overcorrected, potentially, and put all of the plot front and center. Now I feel like I know less about all of these characters. I don't think Luna has like 4 lines. And if we're considering Stoll as the main character at this point, that's still only 5 characters to get line distribution, and she doesn't like say anything. I have a much more tenuous grasp on Moxie's character. It seems like most of his function in this episode is to ask clarifying questions. And the one thing that was established about him in the original pilot, that he goes to extremes quickly, is cut. So I don't know very much about him anymore. Millie remains an extension of Moxie, but even that is lessened because Moxie is lessened. It seems to be that they facilitate jokes about sex and aren't very much independent of that. Blitz has a little bit more going on because Stolas has a little bit more going on. We know more about him, and we see his explicit pursuit of Blitz instead of an implied pursuit of Blitz. And we see more of Blitz's discomfort there, which I like. I think that's very good.
It was clear.
And what did you think about like how do I phrase this question correctly? like Stolas and Blitz's relationship takes up a large chunk of the episode in the first one versus like this one's just a scene. Did you think that balance was a little bit better, that like it allowed other time for other things, or did you like seeing more of Blitz and Stolas?
I enjoyed seeing more of how the relationship worked, but in the first one it did sort of like hit beats, like, you know, it repeated beats. So this one sort of, I think, you know, one, you know, if depending on which one happened later, which I still can't tell.
Oh!
Well, I'm assuming that the second one took place later just because, or like was made later just because it's clearer and seems to be more fleshed out. It seems like the second one, where there's less of Stolas, seems to be more accurate in terms of the proportion in which he's going to be in the show. That it's not going to be like, you know, like a secondary plot. It's going to be more of a B plot, more of a C plot, more of a subplot than being closely related to the business and how it operates, and less sort of stalking Blitz.
So you think that the second one, the one we just watched, is the newer one?
Yes, just because of the nature of just because it's clear, it seems like there's like they have more figured out of the show. There's just more.
There wasn't as much confusion about the characters from both people. They both understood what the characters were like, and they both liked what they saw. Although both agreed that the balance of the Stolas and Blitz relationship was not as even in Mission Zero as it is in the original pilot, which is something I said. In fact, actually, the most interesting thing that happened during both of these interviews was just how many times they said something that I have said in this video. And to be clear, I did not tell them anything about this video. I did not give them any information on my thoughts on these episodes. I did not tell them which one I liked the best. I didn't even tell Renee which episode was which. And this script had been written weeks before I did these.
It was good. It had a couple more tangents, you know what I mean? Like it cut away from the main action a little bit more. So the structure was interesting. A little confusing, but just because it's very like quick, fast, clippy, it wasn't that confusing. Like questions were answered pretty quickly.
I could see that there was a lot of interest in character dynamics. And that's where a lot of the tension and the conflict and the drama was going to come from. But because the structure of the episode bounced back and forth with flashbacks so frequently, and often did kind of an Inception style thing where there were flashbacks within flashbacks, I found myself having a little bit of trouble situating myself in the timeline of those dynamics.
It was hard to follow.
It was hard to follow, and so I couldn't tell really what was supposed to be considered the status quo, since I didn't know what was contemporaneous, what was a flashback. And then eventually at the end, it becomes clear that the heist of the child in the hospital is immediately preceding the conference room scene. Mm-hmm. And so that helped a little bit.
Just because it's clear, it seems like there's like they have more figured out of the show. There's just more. So it seems to me that, well, the first one where it doesn't explain what the premise is could be because there's already an established fan base and people already know what they're watching, so they're like, okay, we're gonna make this really quick, we're gonna make it really snappy, we're not gonna have anything unnecessary, we're really gonna cut it down and make it very, very clear. So I don't know, but to me,
you talked yourself out of it.
I did talk myself out of it because I can see the benefit of both, depending on who their target audience is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know exactly what you mean.
Overall, it felt like this episode was a series of montages rather than a plot in and of itself.
Right. It didn't have much actual plot to follow. It was more like like vignettes, you'd say.
Yeah, it didn't really have its own engine. It seemed like a series of vignettes, kind of in the style of like a clip show.
Because in the first one, they were going directly, they kept going directly to these three guys in this street and seeing like, oh, these are three random guys. But in the newer one, we saw
the Ohio murderer guy? He doesn't have a
Right.
name. I just call him Ohio Murderer.
Ohio Murderer Guy. We saw other murders taking place and reason. They explained why those murders would be taking place.
Put all of the plot front and center. Now I feel like I know less about all of these characters, which may work since the original pilot does maintain a lot of their characterization. If you had seen that original pilot and then went into the further produced show, you wouldn't need to be introduced to those characters again. But if you had never seen the original, you're going into the new series brand new, then this doesn't establish hardly anybody's characters. And we see more of Blitz's discomfort there, which I like. I think that's very good. But if he's going to be spending most of his screen time with other employees at the company, I think his relationship with Moxie, with Millie, and with Luna all suffer from introducing Stolas to a greater degree. They are no longer doing it for the benefit of humans. But that's something that definitely now goes undiscussed, undisclosed, and potentially overwritten. I don't think they talk about being hired by humans. I don't think they talk to anybody about wanting to have someone else murdered. I think it was interesting that they spent several minutes in the opening, maybe not several minutes, it felt like several minutes, characterizing humans as assholes. I think we could have had one or two lines of the like, I hate Christmas, I'm stealing babies. And then maybe some kind of scene or introduction from a person in hell hiring them. I think if that is still how the company operates, that will be something that will have to be stepped out in subsequent episodes because it is no longer clear.
I guess the only question left to wonder is, which pilot did my two interviewees consider to be the best?
Between just these two episodes that we have watched, which one do you prefer?
I think I probably prefer the second. I generally really like television shows that are character and relationship focused. But like I said, my issue with the previous pilot was that I didn't even know what questions the pilot was asking. There were too many blanks for me to fill in. And with this one, I know what questions it's asking. Will Stolas ever come back for the book? What will Blitz do if he has to choose between the book and the company? Will they be able to retain or gain clientele at all? I think it functions a lot more like a pilot is meant to function. I think it looked to me better because I can tell where it's going. I think, however, it will have to do a lot of legwork in subsequent episodes to get me to know and care about the other people at this company. It's still called Helluvaboss, which means supposedly it is about this company, this organization, the people who work at this business. But I don't think the pilot is as centered on that as it used to be.
I did like the second one more just for the nature of being able to see how they're operating and seeing like, because in the first one they were going directly, they kept going directly to these three guys in this street and seeing like, oh, these are three random guys. But in the newer one, we saw
The Ohio Murderer guy? He doesn't have a
Right.
name. I just call him Ohio Murderer.
Ohio Murderer Guy.
Oh. Huh. Shit. Now it is once again the time to decide which episode is the better pilot. Obviously, it has to be the original. Its style and humor and characterization make the more entertaining episode. But it is also quite old, dated, and confusing. It needed restructuring. Okay, so then obviously it's the new one. Much more accurate to the show and the style. But it also just kind of sucks. Is it too late to go back on that every episode sucks opinion? I honestly can't do it. They both suck for completely different reasons. And which one you prefer is largely going to come down to taste rather than objective analysis because they both fail as first episodes. Even my experiment didn't yield any success because both participants picked a different episode for the one they liked the best. I have to make someone the winner because that's what I promised at the start. But I don't know who to make the winner. I've failed. I will totally be able to crown a winner. This way of writing also absolutely destroys the structure and pacing. But you also kept the same joke about the creepy phone call from the original pilot, even though that also appears in Murder Family. Now, in episode 1. And they make the deal in Murder Family, which is now the second episode. I know which episode is the best first episode of Helluvaboss. It's not either of these ones. It's Murder Family. I've mentioned Murder Family a few times throughout the video, but for those of you who are unaware what I'm talking about, after the original pilot in the series was picked up, Spindlehorse then proceeded to make season 1, which began with season 1, episode 1, Murder Family. Our actual first episode. And the one I consider to be the best opening of the 3. First of all, unlike the other 2 episodes, this is actually an episode of television with an actual plot. They give us a goal, killing Martha, the mother, which leads us to our conflict, Moxie being able to kill innocent humans. While we are introduced to all of the main cast, he's the character we focus on the most, and the one who has the actual arc of the episode. He's also where we get our theme from. All humans aren't really innocent. No matter how they seem, they all have some terrible secret sins, and that guilty and innocent aren't really our business. Killing who the client pays is our business. And I find it extremely interesting that these are ideas that are being set up right at the start of the series, considering these concepts will be expanded upon and put into question later on. But yeah, goal, conflict, character arc, theme, the other 2 episodes don't really have any of that. Or if they do, it's a very limited version of it. This episode isn't that much longer than the other 2, but it's the only one structured like an actual TV episode. But it isn't just that makes me think Murder Family is better, it's also just a more clear start to the series. As much as I love the commercial as a way to explain the plot, in my opinion, Murder Family has the best, strongest opening out of all 3 episodes, because it's the only one that has an actual fucking client. Now don't worry, I haven't forgotten about Ohio Murderer. He is a client, and they do use him during the commercial segment to help explain what is happening. But Ohio Murderer is not nearly on the same level as Mrs. Mayberry, which you can probably tell because Miss Mayberry has a fucking name. And having an actual client makes all the difference in the world, for many reasons. First of all, we're getting our subversion of expectations right off the bat. In fact, we kind of get 2. If you know this is a show about hell, this opening is probably not what you're expecting. And whether or not you know that piece of information, it's still surprising when she turns out to be fucking crazy. On top of that, it helps to perfectly explain the premise. There's no random killing with no thought behind it, no mysterious client texting on the phone. No, we see her entire backstory, the reason she's in hell, the reason she wants revenge on this person. We see her ordering the hit from Blitz, who accepts it and then proceeds to go up to the mortal world and kill the hit.
Yeah, I don't think you quite understand how we're operating down here. See, we take revenge out on the living, and it sounds like the core cast of your sitcom of a death, frankly, are all probably down here in hell with you.
It makes so much more sense and helps give us a specific goal for the episode that is going to create conflict for the rest of the episode, rather than, again, just, hey, we gotta kill these random guys. And out of all of the versions of this exact same fucking conversation between Blitz and Stolas, this is the best one. It's the best version of this creepy phone call joke, although I do like the way Blitz delivers the shit off of it. It helps to explain the lore, like what the book actually is, where it came from. It actually feels in character for both Blitz and Stolas, and it actually sets up the full moon deal. Something that is going to keep the series' overarching plot moving. Something that is extremely important to know the details of instead of just being vague about it. And this conversation does all of that in a tighter way that takes up less time than Mission Zero. I seriously don't understand what was the point of repeating beats in Mission Zero if you're not going to tell us anything new and also do it worse than Murder Family. Wait a second. So, it properly establishes the world, characters, and story. It has twists and intrigue. It has a series engine. And on top of that, there's an actual overarching episode plot, and the whole thing actually functions as an episode of television. Oh my god, this is the only one that actually works. And to me, that does make sense. by the time the rest of season 1 started to come out, the pilot was already kind of chucked into the non-canon zone for most people, and obviously we didn't have Mission Zero yet, so for a long time, Murder Family already was our first episode of the show, and honestly, I think it's the best one. I also think that Murder Family explains why Mission Zero is written so strangely, because it's too good. Murder Family is still in the canon, and it already establishes everything you could possibly want to set up, which means you can't set that stuff up in Mission Zero because it's already done. Therefore, you have to spend your time doing something else. And in case you're wondering, oh, but what about your experiment, where you only talked to 2 people? I have more friends.
Hi, I'm Nathan, also Cutting Room Ceiling on YouTube, and I've never seen Helluvaboss, and I'm excited to learn what it is. I've seen merch from it, and I believe I get it confused with Has Been Hotel, and maybe the plot I'm thinking of is the plot of Has Been Hotel, so I'm scared to say what I think it's about.
That's right, I actually got a third person to help with this interview/experiment. And this person also happens to have his own YouTube channel. If you like what I do and you like horror movies, you'll like what he does. So you should really go subscribe to him. Me! Subscribe to me! That's right, Nathan, if that's your real name. This is a betrayal! No, I'm kidding. Go subscribe to him. And just like with Renee and Ellery, I started off by showing Nathan the episode Murder Family and asking him all the same questions that I asked the other 2, as well as showing him both the original pilot and Mission Zero.
What direction were you specifically surprised about?
I didn't know, I'm assuming, they'll do this, in future episodes, is, if, each episode they have to, kill someone from, the real world, I guess. I didn't know that was a thing that they did. And so, I was surprised by that. I think, it's, about, this company in hell who, I guess, take on clients, people, pay them to, go into, I guess, the real world and, I guess, kill people who wronged them while they were still alive as well. And it seems like I would think those, main, I guess, sort of 3 demon-looking people are, the main characters, and then there's the wolf girl who didn't get that much screen time, but I would assume she has some episodes as well. And then I don't know if the teacher lady is now joining them, or if she was a one-off client sort of thing.
She's not a one-off.
Yeah. I would say, it could be just sort of more sitcom-y, where, just the world kind of just resets after every episode, and it's just workplace comedy where each episode they find themselves with some, quirky person they have to kill, and then the challenges that come with it. But from my understanding of the show, maybe it's it is more interconnected between episodes, and so I would think maybe my guess would be they kill some person, and they end up having real world consequences, if they kill someone in the living world, and then that sort of sets off a domino effect of bad things happening, and they have to correct it somehow. And then, there was that scene with Blitz getting the phone call with that other person talking about the book, and so I would assume that gets brought up again, and how that can be a conflict of how they're gonna limit the portal usage to the real world.
As you can see, Murder Family still has the same amount of clarity as the original pilot. Nathan was clearly able to figure out the plot and the style and tone of the show. However, the one thing I will say going against Murder Family as being the best episode is not the plot or the clarity or the structure, but rather the fact that it loses all of the character work of the original pilot.
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite was Moxie, and like sort of his struggle of like not like wanting to hurt people, I guess, or like only like kill someone if like they deserve it, or like if they try and hurt you first. And that was probably like the main like interpersonal conflict that like I liked the most of them, like sort of struggling to like do their job. Yeah, I liked Blitz as well as like sort of just like keeping the story going. And I don't know, like I think, you know, they're a good like pair for each other of sort of, I guess, foils of kind of believing in opposite things. But I don't know, I'm sure like the characters like maybe explored in further episodes, but from this episode it seemed like Blitz was just more like, I'll do whatever, and didn't really have like many, I guess, morals. And so I'm curious to see if they do have any morals, and if those morals will get tested in future episodes. I guess the only thing that I guess I wanted more of is just sort of more, I guess, like characterization and like banter between all the like main like devil characters, of like I was talking about, like Moxie's like conflict of, oh, I don't want to hurt these people. I don't know, I wish there was a bit more like other people were having sort of maybe their own sort of conflicts around what they're doing.
After all, Blitz is the main character of Helluvaboss, but Murder Family is an episode about Moxie. Not only is there less banter between the three of them, but the main character isn't even the focus.
Does that surprise you? Did you expect like Moxie to be the main character, or?
I don't know, like I knew like just from like seeing like posters and in merch from the show that like I knew Blitz was like the main character, but like I don't know, like I guess just yeah, from this episode alone, like I'm just curious to see what like plot lines they would do for Blitz in future episodes. Yeah, I think yeah, going into it blind, I was like curious on like which way it was going. Because I guess like I really liked the opening. It's like grabs your attention really well. And with that, I guess I was like in the first few minutes, I was like, oh, this teacher is going to be like one of the main characters, I guess. But that was just the setup for like the plot of like the actual main characters. And so, but once like you realize, oh, the teacher's not a main character, it's these guys, then like I was sort of back into it.
But after having watched all 3 of these quote-unquote first episodes, which one did Nathan think was the best pilot? Drum roll, please. That might have been the dumbest thing I've ever done.
I think, but also, it is still like a lot of just like sitting around talking, but I think this version had like, out of all 3, some of my favorite jokes. I really liked the bit of crushing up the phone, blending it, and then like, you know, shit over the highway. Yeah, that was funny. And then the joke at the end of mom sucks at drawing her own kid. That was funny. So I really liked those jokes. So yeah, that's what I thought of this one.
So between the 3 episodes, you would say this one is your favorite?
I would still say the first one is my favorite. Just because there's like more, just like it feels like there's just more happening plot wise of like the characters actually like doing stuff.
Yeah! I was right! This person who went into this totally blind, knows nothing about the show, watched all 3 first episodes, and agrees with me that Murder Family is the best one. This is what winning feels like!
So which one of the 3 do you think, like, introduced the concept the best?
Probably the second one.
Which of the 3 do you consider to be the best pilot?
I consider Mission Zero to be the best pilot.
Well, shit. Yeah, that's right. I showed Murder Family to both Ellery and Renee as well, and every single one of my participants picked a different first episode as their favorite, which means I don't even have a majority vote. Well, what was the fucking point of doing any of this shit? Okay. Hang on. It's not all a complete loss at this point. I did get both Ellery and Renee to agree with me on my points of why I like Murder Family the best out of the 3. It seems as though the reason that both of them picked their respective episode over Murder Family was the flaws that the episode has. The fact that it spends so long on its client. The fact that it just drops you in right at the start, expects you to know what's going on. And most importantly, the fact that Blitz is not the main character of this episode. Which are all points I agree with, actually. It seems as though all of us kind of have a very similar mindset. That none of these episodes are really the perfect first episode. It's just that there's one that we like the best out of all of them because it has the most stuff we're looking for in a pilot. The character work, the structure, or the setup for the rest of the series. But none of them are exactly perfect. If I was to grab a time machine and go back in time to when they were writing season 1 for the first time and deciding to jump straight into the episodic episodes despite having a only loosely canon pilot, I mean, seriously, you really should have predicted this predicament. I personally would probably do something that's very similar to Murder Family, but that keeps Blitz as the main character. Something like this. We still start with the client of the episode, though I agree with Ellery that we spend too long on the client and thus it makes it too confusing over whether or not they are a main character. So shorten this segment by a couple minutes. To help with this as well, I would also make the episode as a whole longer, just so the balance as a whole is better. I mean, this is your introduction. You might as well take as much time as you can get. And probably make the client be something more closely related to Blitz. Perhaps a clown, or someone who's a boss of something, or someone who is an asshole in the same way that Blitz is. I don't know. Whatever. Point is, the client orders the hint? Whatever. The point is, the client orders the hit. Then we get some of that character banter that was in the original pilot as they plan the hit, being sure to mention that this is their first hit, and they really need this hit to go well in order to get this company off the ground. You could talk about how they've had no clients, how their advertising has been poor, make reference to the commercial at this point, etc. Pretty similar to Murder Family, they go off to kill the client, and something goes wrong. Again, this is no longer a Moxie episode, so the thing that goes wrong probably shouldn't be Moxie. Maybe it can be, though. If you're making the episode as a whole longer, you could have 2 character arcs throughout it. Whatever, that's not the point. The important thing is something goes wrong. I'd probably also extend this section a little bit just so we can see more of the characters and their different types of fighting and ways of killing. This is probably the weakest section of the episode, especially the Millie fight. I mean, come on, girl. I know you're a glass cannon, but I've seen you fight way better than that. Here is also where I would include the phone call to Stolas, just like in Murder Family. However, I would change 2 things about this phone call. Number 1, I would make it so Stolas is slightly more demanding of the book. Although maybe demanding is the wrong word. Like, he's desperate to get it back. He really needs the book back, and he needs it back now. And then number 2, I wouldn't have Stolas propose the full moon deal yet. Either he doesn't think of it at this time, or perhaps the phone call gets cut off before he can propose it. Something like that. I'm doing these changes because I'm trying to shift the episode away from Moxie and Moxie's arc and towards Blitz and Blitz's arc. So we need to discuss the things that Blitz wants. What does Blitz want? The company to do well. All these little changes that I'm doing are there to push Blitz into a corner. They're just getting their feet off the ground. They have no clients, poor advertising. Ming, what the fuck are you doing here? They have no clients, poor advertising, their first hit just went horribly wrong, and the person who owns the key to the underworld wants it back now. What happens at this point? I don't know. I think a lot of that depends upon exactly whatever you make the client be, but it should probably involve Blitz saving the other two. Perhaps they leave some kind of piece of evidence of demon kind behind. Blitz gets another phone call in which Stolas proposes the full moon deal. I still think it's a good idea for Stolas to be the one to propose it, not Blitz, just moving that later. The person who ordered the hit is like, hey, I'm gonna go spread word of mouth about this company, and we get some more of that character banter between the three of them that was missing from Mission Zero. Perhaps we even play the commercial segment at the very end. Boom, done, everything you could want in a pilot. However, if you were to ask me to crown a winner of the 3 episodes, I would still say it's Murder Family. It has its faults, it's definitely not perfect, but it's the best of the 3 to me. And if you still think that's a cop-out because I should have just stuck to the original 2 pilot episodes, then personally, I pick the original pilot. I think Mission Zero is the worst out of all of them. It has the least interesting plot and the least amount of character work, but at the same time, I think which pilot you personally favor is going to depend upon your taste. Specifically, I think if you prefer the whole assassin murderer plot, you're going to like the original pilot more. Whereas if you prefer the soap opera romance between Stolas and Blitz, you're going to like Mission Zero more. And, yeah. That's it. Yeah, I don't really have a conclusion to this video.
Did you seriously just spend 2 hours talking about each individual first episode only to come to the conclusion that which one is the best is based on personal taste? You fucking piece of shit!